Welcome to the 55th episode of the GameFor Podcast. In this episode, actually back in the office.
Woohoo!
Indeed. We'll talk about games that we'd like to see made from movies and TV shows. I'm Adam.
I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor Podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called MilkCan. And because most of the folks at MilkCan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and the web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. So we're back in the office.
We are back in the office.
It's true.
Which means that we can work on GameFor a lot easier.
That's also true. That's true. We've kind of started rolling that ball a little bit.
Yes.
And we are here now. You may say, but hey guys, back when you used to be in the office doing the recording, you'd also film it and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's a lot of extra work, and we're not quite to that point yet.
Right.
And we're not necessarily sure if it's that interesting to watch the two of us sit across from a table and stare at each other while we talk.
And we've got the COVID bodies going.
Sure, right, yeah.
At least I do.
So there's that, But, so yeah, maybe down the road we'll go down that way. Yeah. But for right now, we're going to just basically, it's still a little bit easier to work together when we're not, in separate cities. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. So, speaking of which, I guess, well, it's not really speaking of which, but you know what I mean. What have you been working on?
Worst segue ever.
Yeah, not good, not good.
So this past weekend, I base coated basically everything I've assembled, printed, bought in the last year that I had not, done before. So,
you went through a lot of primer.
Yeah,
when you say base coat, you mean actually primering.
Oh yeah, sorry, primer. Yeah, I don't know why I said base coat.
Oh, base coat primed.
Yeah, I guess
that's true.
But yeah, I did like the whole one of the big bottles of Lejo, like the black went completely gone.
Wow.
Small bottle of the white Badger is gone.
Steiner Res.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Half of a gray of Lejo. There's a lot less shame in the basement right now. I still have to do a lot of right. I still have to do a lot of Xeno highlights and stuff like that before I can paint. But I mean, those are stuff that's based and ready to go. So that was a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I think that's good. That's good that you were able to kind of get that stuff ready to go, because then it's less of a hindrance to actually start painting on something when you want to.
I was down there for several hours. My wife came down. She's like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "I'm getting there." And she's like, "Oh, it looks like you're almost done." And I'm like, look behind me, and there was like a couple of boxes just filled still. And she's like, "Oh,
yeah."
And she's like, "I'm like, yeah, this is why I've been putting this off, because." And especially for that, because you're like, I'm doing the same color, so
right.
I don't want to have to clean this multiple times, so I might as well do it. But then you get more and more backed up, so you get more and more stuff. You're like,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's, I don't mind priming. I really don't. But it is something that sometimes you do have a tendency to put on the back burner, or else it's a thing where you're like, oh, geez, I got to get, like, for me, I'm like, oh, I got to get this done because I need to paint it on Twitch tomorrow, and I need to let it sit and all that. And so then it's kind of a rush job sometimes, but not always. It's generally, I'll get to that stuff eventually.
Yeah. Well, and for painting and assembling, I kind of have like a mini hobby kit that I kind of take with me up to like for watching a movie or something, so I don't feel so isolated. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah, feeling it, whereas like I'm, when I'm doing the spray booth, it's like very isolated. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm, nobody can really sit there and talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, I got the little airbrush room underneath the stairs. I'm just basically down there, headphones on, working away, getting stuff done. And yeah, even my wife is generally like, she came home a couple days ago. I was priming some stuff that I was painting on Twitch this week. And she came home. She's like, I heard the airbrush, and I was just like, all right. She's like, he'll come upstairs eventually, and so yeah. Cool. What else did you work on or play or do?
Yeah, we finally got the Tales of Yore game from the OP. It's based on the...
Is it the OP or the OP?
I think they're the op now. Maybe it's the OP.
Because it was the company that was formerly known as USAopoly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it was the op, and then maybe it's the OP now.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I should, probably know that.
You should know that.
Yeah.
But but it's based on the game based on the role-playing game played in Onward, and it's geared more...
Onward's was that Pixar? Or
it was Pixar.
It was a Pixar movie that came out at the beginning part of the pandemic, and they put it right onto Disney Plus, I think.
Tom Holland and Chris Pratt.
Yep. Yeah. I saw that.
So they came out, it's basically like D&D Light. It's supposed to be a little bit more natural to play with for kids and stuff. They don't have to know what charisma is.
Sure.
It's now, it's kind of like, it's being social. For the most part, I liked it, but...
And we saw them show that off at the Gamma Expo in early 2020, didn't we? And
right.
We were like, it's coming soon.
May or June that year it was supposed to come out, and then... Yeah, it got delayed, and then it was supposedly out like a month ago. But our store was like, "I've never seen it. If we can't order it yet."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I got an email, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got it in." And I'm like, "Oh,
but
it's a huge box and only like $50. So
that's not too bad.
It's a pretty good deal."
Yeah.
But yeah, some of it I thought was a little. Like the combat's a little strange, coming from the D&D world. Like it's very RPG. Like you have to describe every action to decide what you're rolling. It's not like, I'm getting attacked, so I'm going to defend myself. You have to say like how you're going to defend yourself. Like, am I rolling over? Trying to block with my sword? Am I rolling? Am I using my shield? So it got a little tedious for that. I think they kind of slowed it down a little bit. So I didn't like that part especially, but overall it was good, and family and I had fun playing it. So
nice.
Yeah. And then the last part, I got some of my minis for D&D finished, painted up. So just kind of some like heroes that I had printed a long time ago. I think they were part of the samples from like my mini factory for one of my resin printers, and then I got that printed up.
Oh, so. Nice. And did you said you painted them as well?
Yeah, they had been kind of zenithal a long time ago, and just had been sitting there. So I finally, put paint on them. And
you got a bunch of painting done recently. That's cool.
I did.
You're very productive.
Yeah, I was like, there's going to be so many notes for me to put on
the show. On the podcast, exactly. Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah. Well, I've been working on building some crews for both Stargrave, which is from Osprey Publishing, Osprey Games, and Stargrave is like basically the sci-fi version of Frostgrave, if you're familiar with Frostgrave. But it's a skirmish, kind of story-based kind of game. And that one is your crew, I don't think, is ever bigger than 10, but I could be wrong on that. But that's where I'm kind of targeting. And then I'm also working on some crews as well. Again, building. I haven't got to the painting portion yet. But for another small little skirmish game, real indie kind of fun little game called Space Weirdos from Garsky Games. Found them on Wargame Vault because I've been looking at Wargame Vault a lot lately since the launch of Reign in Hell. And then all of a sudden I saw this game that was released, and I really liked the cover. And I was like, Space Weirdos, you say? And I looked at it, and I pulled the trigger. It was like $5. And it's just a small little 16-page PDF, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, you showed me. The artwork's so kind of neat. It's got a very
there's like really
nice
like literally there's
it.
Just artwork on the cover. Everything else on the inside is like pictures of models, maybe. But that's
it's got
about
a good style and like tone to it. And
it's got a very zine kind of thing going on, which I dig. So I'm actually taking some of the, I think they're called the Hobgrots from the new Age of Sigmar 3.0 Dominion box launch.
Okay.
So they're like they're smaller than regular orcs, but they're not as small as like say Gretchen or Grotz or whatever. They're kind of mid-range. And I'm taking a bunch of them and basically converting them, like getting rid of their swords and then giving them guns and stuff like that. And so they're going to be they're going to be Space Weirdos is what they're going to be. And so there'll be one group for that. And then, the thing about all of these different sci-fi kind of miniatures agnostic games is it's really easy to just be like, okay, cool, I'll grab these guys. So I was playing for these guys for this game, and then I'll use them in this game, and as long as you can get them to kind of be roughly the same or, whatever, it works out nice that way. So I like that. So yeah, I'm just building on that process right now, doing a little bit of converting here and there, obviously where I need to. But yeah. And then I am working on a new Devout. Well, I actually worked on the Devout for my. So I'm working on a Reign in Hell Cabal that is all Games Workshop miniatures, and I've been painting 4. I technically have 5 ready to go, but I haven't even touched one of them yet because he's so small. He's making me a bit nervous. But I've been painting them on Twitch, and I've got an armored demon and a corpulent demon, and then 2 slaughter fiends. Well, I need also a Devout, because you need a Devout for every Cabal. And for the Brokers, which is the philosophy that I'm going with, that Devout is called a Tallyman. The word was just completely escaping me. So I made a Tallyman out of one of the Nurgle Chaos Lords that everyone's kind of seen. It's been around forever. It's a great model. And so I worked on building him on Saturday last week, and then on Sunday I primed him. So yeah, just a couple days ago. And then I started painting him. We're recording this on Tuesday. I started painting him last night on Twitch, actually. So that was my 1-year anniversary on Twitch, actually. For hobby stuff. I had been messing around a little bit with playing video games a little bit previous to that, but otherwise, a year ago was when I started first doing hobby stuff.
That's crazy. It seems like a lot longer.
Yet it also doesn't seem that long ago. It's a strange new world. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. But yeah, so he started getting some paint love last night, and that's good. I'm working on some terrain projects as well. I've got a bunch of MDF terrain that I've really got to clear some space on my gaming table so that I can then easily use a lot of clamps, because with MDF terrain I like to use like wood glue, but then also a lot of clamps. It just helps hold things together, so I'm not standing there holding it for a long time. And so, yeah, I'm working on that, and then I'm also working on painting some pieces of GW terrain that I had primed quite some long time ago, and then actually, when I was priming the Tallyman guy, I just did like a silver zenithal over this black like rattle can prime on this piece of terrain, and now I'm just kind of messing around with contrast paints and stuff, and I'm going to try to see what I get out of it. It's honestly a little bit more, I don't know, experimental than anything. Like if I hate it, I'll just prime it over again and do it again. It's not big of a deal, but it's always good, I think, to kind of stretch your legs a little bit and do weird stuff. I was working on a model recently, like who's all skin tone because he's like a barbarian, like a berserker, and he's just basically got pants on. So he's all shirt, and he's like huge, like super huge muscle guy. Like he's got 38 more muscles than a normal human would, as far as I could tell. And so I was painting him and just trying to teach myself skin better, and I mean, I learned things. I learned that I think I was doing it wrong, but still, it's something.
You know one thing that doesn't work now.
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, not exactly hobby related, but I've been working on the basement again, because I want to be able to move the studio down there. My wife, I basically kind of got her involved, and I'm like, look, this is what I want to do, and all this kind of stuff and everything. And I was trying to figure out where things are going to go, and I'm like, I know how far the camera needs to be away from me and how far I want it to be away from the background, so I get a nice shallow depth of field and all this stuff, but I just don't know where I'm going to put this and that. And then she's just like, well, what if we move the workbench area and put it over here, and then that's your new backdrop area? And I'm like, I never even thought of doing that. That's spectacular. So yeah, it's a good thing that she's around. So that's in progress. Let's just say that. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
So today's topic, we were talking about this recently, and we were just like talking about like, like different shows and things like that that or movies and things, and like, well, it's strange, like, because there's plenty of stuff out there, obviously,
right,
that it already has. From an intellectual property standpoint, already has games.
Yeah, right. And the nice thing is that at least in the last like 5, maybe even 10 years, but I would say at least the last 5, they're finally being like good games from intellectual property. Like
that's true.
It's not just and I apologize to USopoly, but a just rethemed Monopoly. With the logo splashed on it and some character names.
But there have been plenty of games out there that have come out with licensing attached, and then you're just like, why did you bother? I mean, like, kind of a relatively famous one, at least within miniatures, is Starship Troopers. They like Mongoose Publishing, I think it was, went hard on Starship Troopers as a miniatures game, and then people just didn't buy it in droves. Like, they just stayed away. And then it was one of those things that every time you go to Gen Con and you go to like the discount like booth, you would just see piles of it, And there was a lot of like just kind of janky kind of games out there that were based off of these different types of licenses. But then all of a sudden they did start to kind of take off. I mean, like look at Star Wars X-Wing.
Yep.
That was crazy. Star Wars Legion doing quite well. I know there have been some Star Trek games out there that have been pretty popular, and
the Harry Potter Hogwarts box.
Yeah, there was like there's been some board game things, but hasn't there also been maybe a miniatures game too? I swear there was a miniatures game. Maybe like a gateway game between board games and miniatures, yeah. But yeah, Starship Troopers not on that list of good things. And so but nonetheless, like I said, things have gotten better in that direction. And we were seeing, like you were talking about Onward before, and about the game that's basically, it makes perfect sense to make a game based off of that movie in which they play basically like a Dungeons and Dragons type game. It makes total sense.
Right.
But I think so. We were going to talk about like some games ideas that these are total freebies. You guys can have these if you wanted to like go and buy the licensing and then start producing a game for it. You can totally maybe send us a free copy or a couple, something like that.
Yeah, or
that'd
just
be fun.
Like, thank us in the notes.
Like, sure, that'd be pretty cool. Name a kid after us, whatever. I mean, that's fine. But I don't know. You want to alternate on these? What do you want to do?
Yeah, let's alternate.
All right. You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So one idea. And these are going to be of all different types of games.
Right.
I will admit most of mine will probably be miniatures because that's kind of my jam. Yeah. But yours kind of hop around a little bit more too. I've got a couple others in there as well. But one idea is so the movie Avatar with the big blue people and all that stuff, Fern Gully in space or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I enjoyed it well enough. It's not a masterpiece. I know that they're coming with a couple more of them real soon, I believe.
I feel like we've been saying that for years now.
Well, you gotta release the game, the movie when the time is right. Yeah. I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, allegedly there's at least a couple more that are supposed to be coming, sequels, I guess, to Avatar or whatever. The thing that I thought was the coolest about Avatar was that the humans had these big honking like robots that they could drive around in.
Yeah.
That would like mimic their movements and stuff like that. And they were almost like mechs. But I mean, it was because the big blue people on the planet were like 15 feet tall or something like that. So they're like, well, we need something so we can get into a hand-to-hand. And there is like towards the end of the movie, spoiler alert, there is a super cool hand-to-hand combat fight between a big blue guy and the guy in a robot suit.
But yeah, like the trooper vehicles, like the helicopters, or things.
All those vehicles and stuff like that. It would be, I think that would make for a super cool RPG, or not RPG, a miniatures game.
Well, and then all the animals that the Atagonians or whatever.
Navi.
Navi, yeah.
Something like that.
I don't know.
Or maybe Atagonians. I'm not sure what Atagonians are.
I don't know.
You made that one up. That's trademarked.
That's
you can't
trademarked.
Use that.
That's
No, yeah.
But yeah, all the fun colors and shapes and...
Oh, yeah, terrain would be dope.
Oh, terrain would be
really it would be super cool. You could do some really neat stuff with it. But yeah, I just know. I remember seeing like there's this big fight where like the kind of grizzled old I don't know if he's a colonel or whatever gets into a fight with a big blue guy.
Yeah, the Marine, yeah.
And he like reaches into his belt and he pulls up the knife, and then the big robot does the same thing and pulls the knife like out of a sheath on its like robot hip or whatever. And I was just like, oh, and then he gets into like a knife fight with him. It's super cool. I haven't watched it in a long time. Nonetheless, I think that'd be kind of a cool thing to do as far as some sort of miniature game. Honestly, or if someone just has an STL of like one of those big robots, I wouldn't mind working on it too.
I bet there probably is.
Yeah, you'd think. But yeah. So yeah, that was my first idea.
That's a good one to start off with.
What do you got?
All right, so we're gonna go back to the early '90s, I think, on this one.
Okay.
Early mid '90s. I was thinking Sliders RPG.
Sliders. No, that's not the little hamburgers that you get from White Castle.
So in Sliders, he basically he had like a little like remote, if I remember right, that would basically he couldn't tell where to jump him, but would jump into an alternate reality of where he was at.
Right. He was always trying to get back to his reality.
Right.
And so every time they would go into a new place, things would be different. Sometimes things would look completely the same, except something would be just off.
Just slightly off. Or sometimes something had really altered. So it was like it was all underwater or something.
Yeah.
Or ice or something. But I was thinking, even if it wasn't a consistent world, but maybe one where the rule set allowed the DM to take the group and alternate their own realities, so that it kind of was each group had kind of their own worlds and alternate realities of their own worlds and stuff, kind of like playing off of that, and like, oh, what if Pete never met,
because in the show they all were from the same reality, right?
Right.
So you're interested in this RPG of maybe picking up people from different timelines?
No. So but it's instead of being from that, there's their reality from the show. It's your own reality. So like your friend, like say you're playing with Bob and Pete.
Sure.
Well, like Bob and Pete were friends since kindergarten.
Right.
Well, what if Bob and Pete didn't meet, and so now you met later in life, and
so it's less of playing a role. It's really more of a game of changing around or playing a new role as yourself, but from another reality.
Possibly, yeah, right.
That'd be kind of interesting. Yeah.
Or you're playing yourself in that reality, trying to get back, and
no, that'd be kind of interesting. I think that with RPGs specifically, you can definitely get into some strange story stuff. I know a lot of folks are mainly into RPGs because they're like, well, I want to like level up and get some gold pieces and like, and fight some monsters and stuff. But there's also a lot of role-playing games out there that focus a lot more on the role-playing and, all that kind of stuff, which is also interesting. But I'm glad that there's stuff out there for both types of folks, really.
Yeah.
RoboCop. I'm a big RoboCop fan. Always have been. And again, miniature war game. Now you think to yourself, well, that seems like what is an army of RoboCops versus an army of non-RoboCops?
Absolutely.
Well, that's cool. No. But my thought process is it's a miniatures game where instead of playing the normal type of miniatures game style where it's me playing against you and we're having our equally sized forces and stuff like that, I would like to have it be basically either a solo or potentially co-op game where you play as RoboCop. So let's say if you're playing it solo, you're RoboCop and you're going up against a bunch of crooks, and that's each scenario is you versus crooks, and maybe you have to do certain things. You have to save an innocent person or a member of this, whatever.
Or preserve evidence.
Sure, all kinds of different options like that. But you've got to work against these kind of like solo play, kind of AI-driven sort of bad guys. And if you're going to play co-op, it would be maybe you and your human partner. Or
maybe like
an
assault on Precinct 13 type scenario too.
Yeah, definitely. I could see even sort of almost, I want to say tower defense, but it's a little bit, and the tower defense is more of like set up and then wait for it. But
right.
Yeah.
But
I think that'd be cool because there's not really a good way to have like two equal forces. But again, like, I don't know. I'm becoming more and more interested in tabletop miniatures war games that are not just you and I fight.
Right.
But they are a little bit more like the solo stuff. Like we've gotten a lot of feedback on with Rain and Hell with the game that we produced, but people saying, man, I really wish I could play this solo. And we're actually working on a solo expansion that's going to be for free that you'll be able to get both solo and co-op, and it'll have 6 scenarios attached to it. So you can play those scenarios. And it's going to be like a story. Like it's going to be, you play scenario 1 and then you play scenario 2 and you just try to basically live all the way to the end. That's what we're working on. But I think something that would be kind of cool like that too for a game like RoboCop. And then if you're a big company and you want to go down that road, well then you can release expansion packs that are just more scenarios that are, again, maybe stories that you potentially play, like, again, like almost like a choose your own adventure. You get to the end of this scenario, and because you did not do this and this, therefore your only choices are this or this. Whereas if you had done all of these things and you'd gotten all the bad guys, then you'd have maybe 3 or 4 choices or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like you didn't capture, you weren't able to get enough evidence on the mayor, so the mayor is able to do this on you. So.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and I just like RoboCop, and I think that, it'd be fun to just have, you're a RoboCop character, and then you work on a bunch of different crooks and stuff like that. I mean, that's if someone gets the licensing, that would be a relatively simple deal.
Yeah.
And again, you wouldn't need a whole bunch of different types of RoboCops. You would just need RoboCop.
Right.
And then, like, a partner if you're going to play solo, or co-op, and then you just need a bunch of crooks. So, yeah, it wouldn't be crazy difficult. I mean, I think the hardest part, honestly, would be get the licensing.
Yeah, maybe, well, you could have the that one robot.
Your Ed 209?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, that's true. Could also have in there. That's a good point. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Now, him I've seen 3D printed. I've seen plenty of that one, nice STLs for that, yeah. All right, what else you got?
All right, I've got Indiana Jones board game.
Nice.
Kind of like an escape room style. So it's a
lot of puzzles.
Basically trying to get out of the temple alive, you know. So, yeah, puzzles and, kind of, I'm thinking kind of like when he's trying to get into the Last Crusade, where he's trying, he's got to, take the riddles and solve the riddles, so his head doesn't get chopped off.
Yeah, with all the holy grails and all that stuff.
Yeah, how he's going to cross the bridge and which grail is the right grail to drink from, and maybe swapping out the
you'd want to make it
idols and stuff like that.
You'd want to make it so that just watching the movie doesn't give you a fair advantage. You'd have to have all new puzzles,
new puzzles,
like
but
that.
like those kind of things. Where you're like, oh, because I know, like it could be a good learning one. Like because I know history.
I'm a little surprised they haven't made an escape room based off of Indiana Jones anyway.
I know, right?
That's kind of weird. Yeah. Fireball Island.
Yeah,
I mean a little
bit, but that's
I would very strongly think that ball coming down the thing is kind of a bit pulled away from the original movie in 81 or whenever 83,
I'm sure
whenever it
that was probably like what they started out, and then they just didn't get the license, and they're like, well, now it's not a boulder, it's a fireball.
Right? Yeah. They could have done that. Yeah, no, it's a lava. I don't know, whatever. But
and they repainted the gold idol black because now it's a volcano god.
Right? Yeah, we'll just tweak a bunch of things. I mean. That's done a lot. Yeah. I mean, you've seen that in, oh gosh, what the heck was it? It was, I think that StarCraft was originally the company that made StarCraft, Blizzard, right? Blizzard was working, I've always heard that Blizzard was working with Games Workshop. And they were like trying to make a game, and then somebody backed out. I think maybe Games Workshop, but I don't know that for sure. And then Blizzard's like, okay, cool. And then they're just like, well, we're just going to kind of tweak things enough so that it's, and then that's, So, that's interesting. No, that'd be cool, I think. And you're thinking like a board game, though. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, like escape room type board game. And, I also I like Stargate. Stargate could also be, it's not as popular of an IP, so that,
Oh, well, that was a TV show, too, wasn't it? It was the movie that had James Spader, but then it was a TV show like for a lot of seasons, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I absolutely love it. But, so that's where, but... Yeah. Not quite as a family name, but probably maybe easier to get the IP, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe. It's potential.
They're both, I think, one's MGM and one's Disney now, right? Or
I don't know what's Indiana Jones.
I don't know who owns that right now.
Yeah, I don't either. That's a good question because they bought Star Wars, but I don't know if that means they bought Indiana Jones.
Lucas, yeah.
Yeah. Well, did they buy Lucasfilms? Maybe they bought Lucasfilm. I don't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah, either. The Expanse. So I've not watched very much Expanse. My wife watches it and enjoys it, and I think maybe has read the books.
Okay.
But and there is an Expanse RPG out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that an Expanse like spaceship combat game would be really interesting because the spaceship fighting in that game and stuff like that is very realistic, for lack of a better word. Like they've tried really hard to be like, this is what it would actually be like to fight ship to ship in
space. They seem to be trying to use Newtonian physics and a lot of
a lot of Newtonian physics and a lot of we're going to be shooting a lot of projectiles and not lasers, and we're going to be doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
Battlestar Galactica, where they're 90-degree turns. And
where they're basically flying through space like they're airplanes. Yeah. Well, and the same with Star Wars and any of those games. Yeah, exactly. But the other one that did was a big fan of that too was Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Like when they would be dogfighting, those ships would turn around like on their axis and then fire behind them and cool stuff like that.
Right.
And so I think it would be sort of hard to make work in a miniatures game. I know that there have been other miniatures games out there that are spaceship combat that have tried to do that kind of pseudo-Newtonian physics. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it would be easiest probably to make it work in a video game, but I think that the ships are so kind of like, I want to say interesting, but it's really more like they're interesting because of how realistic they are as opposed to, you know what I mean? And I almost wonder if that's not a thing, like those ships could be 3D printed, not very difficult because they're basically just a lot of blocks and modules and stuff like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, or they could have a creator too that's...
that's true. You have like an online creator where you're like, I need like an engine core, and you've got 6 different ones to choose from, and then you do this and this and this, and then boom, makes you an STL, and then it all fits within their aesthetic for their different factions and stuff. That'd be super cool. These are free ideas, folks. You can just go and crank out with these what you will.
Just remember us in your will.
Name your dog after us. So that would be an idea, I think, for a cool miniature spaceship game. Again, not an RPG because they already got that done. So that's what you got next?
Okay, my next one is based on the TV show Psych, which is a
it was USA, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, USA comedic duo where he was very good at observation.
Wanted to be the detective, but couldn't for some reason.
He couldn't because he got arrested and and then there was the dad issues and
Sure.
all that stuff. But and because they were because they were trying to figure out how he was solving all these crimes, they thought he was actually a part of it. So he had to try to like spin up a good reason of why he was able to do that they would believe, and just told him he was psychic. And
so then they just started hiring him sometimes.
Right. So he had to pretend he was psychic. But I'm thinking of some kind of observation game where, kind of like a Where's Waldo type, or I Spy.
Yeah.
Mixed with, was it Vast? No, not Vast. The game with all the different artwork on the cards and stuff. No,
I can't think of it.
Yep, I'm going completely blank.
Yeah.
Anyway, something like that where there's a wide artwork and maybe some kind of team game where you have to like identify how many hats are in there.
You could see, what you could be would be really cool is to have a bit of an AR component to it. Whereas like you'd be able to look at these like scenes on these like sheets, and then as you look through your phone at them, maybe as things happen, you're able to then it kind of points things out or adds things in them.
Oh yeah.
I know there was a board game a while back, I don't know, a couple of years back, that was basically like a police investigation style game, but it was like old timey, like Victorian era, and then you had this like thing. You were basically like looking through your like
spectacles.
Yeah, they're like, what do they call them? Pince nez, I believe, is like the little spectacles that just sat on the tip of your nose.
Yeah.
And you just kind of clamped them onto your nose, and so you look through those in your phone in the app, and then you would look at like the scene and everything, and these posters that came in, and then you could spot certain things or whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was kind of cool tech. But yeah, something like that would be sort of cool too. I could see that. That's pretty neat. Let's see here.
What do you have?
Fargo. I was trying to think of like shows that I like to watch, and I got to be honest, we don't watch a lot of television, my wife and I. I mean, she likes to watch sports more than I do by a long shot, but that's one thing. So I was like, I don't know, what kind of stuff is there? So I was thinking, we do like to watch Fargo, and there's been like 4 seasons of that, I think.
Yeah.
And I could see that being an RPG. And the thing that's interesting about Fargo, for those of you who haven't watched it, which you should, because it's really good, is that it's almost always something to do with crime.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always good folks and bad folks in these and each season is different and takes place in different times. They all take place in like kind of the upper Midwest.
Right.
But they all take place in different eras. The most recent season that came out during the pandemic was in like the 40s or the 50s, I think.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah. But in this situation, you could either play as potentially the crime families, or you could play maybe as the law officers and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Again, because it's a RPG, it's probably not particularly competitive. That's usually not the way that those things are played too much. So you'd want to be all on the same team. But yeah, I think there would be some kind of cool stuff that could be done there, because there's the shows have got, all the people in the shows have got very interesting kind of weird quirks. And so you could easily put a lot of NPCs in there with a lot of weird quirks. And there's sometimes even a little bit of a weird, I don't want to say supernatural, but maybe just a scotch of supernatural in some of them. Like one of the seasons, there was a little bit of a thing about maybe there were aliens involved at some point, and then like there was kind of like a ghost in the most recent series, sort of.
Interesting.
Yeah, okay. So that kind of stuff I think would be really interesting to try out. I think that'd be an interesting RPG.
Right. And you could throw your GM into a wood chipper.
Yeah, I guess there's that too. That's a good point.
Nice. All right. So my next one is game based on the show Dexter.
Oh, right. Yeah, with the serial killer guy.
Right. So I'm thinking maybe a cop game.
Mm-hmm.
But then have kind of the hidden assassin. Like one of you is the kind of the Dexter of the group that's trying to kill off all of you because you're all corrupt cops.
But you wouldn't actually, like, you wouldn't have one person who'd play Dexter. Because that would be easy to spot then. You'd be like, he's the bad guy.
Right, yeah.
Right.
He wouldn't dress up like Dexter and be like, I'm Dexter.
Well, I mean, if you were playing it, like, are you talking about like a board game, or is this more of like one of those?
Yeah, like a board game, kind of like almost like Ultimate Werewolf, but not.
Oh, okay. So not so much board a game,
right?
But yeah.
A tabletop.
Sure, yeah. Or what about even something along the lines of? Oh no, I'm starting to blank.
Camelot. I think.
Yeah, there's Shadows over Camelot. There's also a Battlestar Galactica board game.
Yes,
any kind of a traitor situation.
Right, yeah,
we have a traitor, an unknown traitor. In this situation, obviously,
it's Dexter. So maybe
Dexter. So you would have to be somebody,
everyone else
Dexter adjacent.
Everyone is like corrupt cops or whatever, and as far as you know, he is too. But
that's true. Yeah.
But he's out trying to kind of clean up the mess and kill you or something. I don't know.
Yeah, as a board game, like that traitor kind of mechanic that you see in some board games, like Shadows over Camelot or whatever it's called, and the Battlestar Galactica one, which I know was quite popular. The Battlestar Galactica one was interesting because you just you might recognize the person, from the show, and you might know that on the show they were a Cylon, but that doesn't mean they are here. You know what I mean?
Right.
In the board game, I think. So I mean, that's kind of cool that way. But yeah, that kind of hidden traitor thing. I don't know. What's the other game? Well, it's not so much hidden traitor at that point, but in what is it? The Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Yeah.
Like eventually, in most scenarios, somebody becomes a traitor. You didn't know it ahead of time, but neither did they. You know what I mean? And then something happens, and oh, now it turns out I'm the traitor, and then or the bad guy, or whatever you want to call it. So that's an interesting kind of setup as well, I think. So let's see here. I would love to see and this isn't. I started thinking about what movies do I really like? Well, Mad Max / Road Warrior. I mean, Lord knows there's been plenty of games out there that have been based off of cars driving around and doing stuff like that. I mean, that's a thing we've seen it. But yeah, I think that making it actually based off of the game, off of the movie. There's also a video game that I can think of back from 2015 or 2016. There was a video game. But yeah, I would definitely like to see some sort of game where you've got the different cars and you're playing almost maybe along the lines of a Car Wars style game. Or Games Workshop years and years and years ago made a game called Dark Future, which was also kind of a Road Warrior style game, and you were just basically going down a road tile and you'd get to the end and then you kind of flip it, so that you could keep you all head in the same direction, and you would take off the last tile at the end of the thing and put it at the beginning, so you were constantly scrolling down the road. And so that's kind of a cool concept as well. I could see something like that, but I think it could also be an RPG, or maybe both. Maybe it's an RPG and a miniature game. So you have the miniature game, and then in between you have RPG elements where you do things.
Combat is settled on the road or in the Thunderdome.
Sure, yeah, and then otherwise you have to go talk to the the tavern owner, and then go from there. But yeah, that's a callback to a video I was making recently about RPGs. But yeah, I think that the most recent movie, Fury Road, was quite popular, so I could see that being something that could maybe draw some people in. And maybe the mixture of being able to do... I mean, certainly you could do either one. You could just choose to just play the RPG. You could just choose to just play the miniatures game. But if there was a cool way to mix them together, I think that you could see it. There's not a lot of games that do that mix them together. I know there's been games that have attempted it in the past. But it would be kind of interesting. I think I'd like to see something like that myself. So
yeah, I like it. All right, my final one is a 28 millimeter miniatures game based on Red Dawn. So a skirmish game where basically you've got the high schoolers. Yeah, the Wolverines.
Right.
Versus an actual army. I know Team Yankee kind of has the what if they went to war.
Yeah.
But it's really the U.S. versus the USSR, where this would be more of a skirmish.
Yeah, in Team Yankee, it's basically alternate history World War III that happens in the 80s kind of a thing. Whereas Red Dawn, the original movie at least, I don't remember I never saw the remake. Did you ever see the remake?
I did, but I don't remember it.
Did it happen in the 80s or did it happen now?
It was so unremarkable, I don't remember it.
That is unfortunate. That's a bummer. Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't see it. But yeah, Team Yankee from Battlefront is very... it's mostly tanks.
Right.
There's some little tiny dudes you run around with little squads of people, but it's mostly tanks. So I could see if it's a game with Wolverines versus whatever forces.
Right. Maybe it's a co-op. I mean,
who came?
Co-op would be fun.
Do you remember in the new movie who was the bad guys? Was it the Chinese? Because it was Russians in the first one.
I want to say it was the North Koreans.
Well, that seems strange.
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure it was the North Koreans, and then you're really?
Where did they get all that stuff?
They took over. Okay.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. But yeah, I guess that's something. I know there was a video game called Homefront or something like that was about the North Koreans kind of taking over America somehow. Again, I don't know how that would work, but whatever.
Okay.
I guess it's just all trickery. They were just tricking us for the longest time to making it think like
it's all Dennis Rodman's fault.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, I mean, I think that'd be kind of cool, though. I mean, there are plenty of obviously like 28 millimeter kind of skirmishy style games out there, but I think that there's something to be said for like the asymmetrical aspect to the battles. You've got like trained military soldiers versus basically high school seniors,
right? Which is why I think it might even be more fun to be as a co-op, because then you kind of feel like you're the underdogs.
Yep.
And you're trying to beat the system down.
Yeah, no, I could see that. That would be something. Yeah, I think that you're going to start to see, especially in a lot of these games, I think you're going to start to see more and more games that are, well, partially because of the pandemic, you're going to see more games that are maybe co-op or at least solo.
Yep.
But also when you want to tell a story, it's way easier to tell a story when you're playing it that way versus when you're just playing, hey, let's you and me fight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's not so much of a story. Or even if you do like a like a campaign, there's still just like, well, we fought 6 times. That was the story. I eventually lost. You know, I mean, like,
right. And it's hard to really balance those where you're like, and still be creative. Like, oh, I've got this gigantic guy, and thematically, well, then you have to have a gigantic guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the whole concept. I did a video about that, about like the kind of the myth to some degree of game balance, and you can have a perfectly balanced game pretty much, or very, very close to perfectly balanced game, but it's probably chess, you know, or something like that. You know, I mean, it's basically things are identical except that one guy gets to go first. That's basically it. You know, that kind of stuff. In miniatures games, with especially as you get to more and more into special abilities and other things that don't have a mathematical equal, then it's very difficult to say, oh, well, these two forces are exactly the same. But if you play off of that and say, we're the underdogs, but we have these other resources that maybe we can use against these, mindless, faceless, whatever military folks, then, that I think that's cool stuff. I dig that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Is there anything else you can think of as far as games?
I tried really hard to come up with like a collectible card game. I think the best I came up with that I threw out was The Simpsons, or something. But
Simpsons collectible card game would probably sell.
It probably would.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, there have been plenty of collectible card games based off of it. There was a pretty popular back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think, pretty popular Lord of the Rings card game. There have been Star Trek, Star Wars, like a lot of this from like Decipher and stuff like that. Those have been pretty popular.
Well, when you were talking about the sports and stuff, even though it's not technically a TV show or movie, I was thinking with like the rise of the like baseball cards and stuff are becoming popular and expensive again.
Yes, they are.
Like it'd be kind of interesting to take like the sports card dynamic and kind of turn that as a collectible card game.
Yeah, no, that would be interesting.
With sports rules and stuff. I was thinking like all the people that have like who was the greatest basketball team of all time? Like, like fantasy football type thing.
Be able to like build your own team and stuff like that.
Build your own team with those points. And
that would be kind of cool. Yeah, I could see that. Especially like your dream team kind of thing. Like there's your name right there. Just call it Dream Team, and then have like a basketball version and a baseball version and a football version or whatever. You can just print money.
Right.
You get this for free. You just have to name your second and third kids after us.
Right. It's not the fourth one, though.
No.
Nobody likes the fourth one.
Well, that's not true. What if you are the fourth person?
Oh, yeah. Except for that you're the fourth.
You, not me.
You're the example.
You listener who is the fourth kid. You are well loved.
The exception.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know what we're talking about here. All right. So if you, and by you I mean the listener, have any kind of ideas for you'd like to see some sort of movie or TV show turned into a game. I know that our list was completely exhaustive and is basically there aren't any other movies.
There's
or TV
no more.
shows.
Now, there's a bunch of game designers that are like throwing their pencils up in the air.
You're like, well, there's my idea. Dang,
that was the last one.
Yep. But in case there was one we missed, you could certainly mention it in the comments below on YouTube, or you could shoot us an email if you wanted to. That'd be fine too. And that'd be great. And so I think that for quite some time there was a stigma, I think, to licensed games, but I think that it started to go away. Like I said earlier, with the games like the Star Wars stuff, like that's been selling very well, and some of those other things. But I still think that there could be some cool stuff that could be done with some of these things. And the benefit to licensing very frequently, the reason companies do it so frequently is because As soon as you say, oh, hey, this is a game that does this and this and this, people are like, oh, okay, cool. But you go, hey, this is a Harry Potter game that does this, this, and this. Now you've immediately gotten the attention of Harry Potter fans. Like, that's the reason you do this stuff. But that doesn't necessarily make it bad. Sometimes it's also cool because if you're a fan of that stuff, you get to think about it a lot while you're playing and have a fun time with that kind of in your head and everything. And maybe the game's good too.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player or just aren't into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.